Hello my lovely friends and welcome back to my channel. Today we are doing my May wrap up. Oh my goodness, it was a good month for books. I was able to read a total of 6 full books this month, plus like a bonus book, so we'll call it 7 full books. Before we get started, don't forget to like and subscribe and ring the bell icon so you know when I upload new videos. I upload 3 days a week. I'm gonna do this in a little bit of reverse order because literally I just finished the audiobook of the first book I'm gonna talk about. The acknowledgement started playing on the audiobook. I hit pause and hit record on this. So literally 10 seconds ago, I finished Pinata by Leopoldo Gout. I obviously still need time to process this because I just finished it, but initial impression, I loved it. I loved it. It was so good. As much as I love horror books, I don't get scared by them. I can definitely appreciate the horror aspects and creepiness. And this one didn't scare me either, but this was the closest I've gotten, I would have to say, to being thoroughly spooked by a book. Half of this book is set in Mexico and the other half is set in New York. It is like a classic possession story, but with indigenous Mexican lore and legend and mythology woven into it. And unlike things like, I don't know, the first thing that comes to my mind is Poltergeist, when they, you know, dig up the bones under the pool and it's like, oh, cursed native land. This felt properly informative and respectful, where you're really learning about the Nahua culture and indigenous Mexican cultures, and not just this sort of anonymous indigenous people's cursed land is attacking white people now. It's not that at all. There were some properly terrifying moments in this book, some really good imagery, and like I said, I listened to the audiobook. Ooh, let me just remember who read it. Like I said, I was listening to the audiobook, which was narrated by Krista Gonzalez, and she was incredible. She did an exceptional job with the different voices, the different accents, and different languages that are represented in this book. I don't even want to get into too much detail on the scares because I just want to leave that up to you. But I do have to say this is one of my favorite covers of all time. And you all know I work in a bookstore. I'm one of the only horror readers at the store. And I ordered this in specially for us so I could do it as a staff pick. And when my coworkers opened the box and saw the cover, they were all like, this is the most terrifying thing I've ever seen. What is wrong with you? So yeah, a properly spooky cover for a properly spooky book. Alrighty, let's now go all the way back to the beginning of the month. If you remember my April wrap up, I mentioned that I was about halfway through A House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher. I'm happy to say that I actually finished it. T. Kingfisher, my favorite author of all time. Absolute banger, knocked it out of the park with this one. I am so overtired today. I'm sorry if I'm just like, I don't know what kind of mood I'm in right now. A House with Good Bones is a properly modern haunted house story. The house itself is a cute little cookie cutter subdivision house that was built like 10 years before the story starts. As with all of T. Kingfisher's books, you have to be aware and comfortable with her sort of whimsical style of writing. It works really well for her fantasy books, and in my opinion works really well for her horror books. I did see some reviews on Goodreads though that criticized her sort of nonchalance. I don't really know how to describe it, but like there's a lot of quirkiness and a lot of humor to her books is what I'll say. And that doesn't mean that they're not scary. Although some parts of the book did drag for me towards the beginning, I was worried that I wasn't really going to get into it. By the end, by the climax, and then the surprise second climax, I was in. This is 5 stars. And it's a good thing it's 5 stars because I was actually gifted the Broken Binding special edition copy. So I own it twice. I don't know which one I like better. They're both gorgeous and they're so different. Get hardcover, nothing on the back. And then my favorite part of this edition, I don't want to break the spine, is these sort of floral wallpaper-esque end papers. I love them. If I could have that as actual wallpaper in my house, I would. One of the highlights of A House with Good Bones for me as well was that the main character is a fat woman. Her own words, not mine. But she really owns that about herself. It's not this big shame point for the character. It's not even a big part of the character's character, if that makes sense. I don't want to give too much away, but there's a hilarious moment with the evil entity in this book trying to really break down the spirit of the main character, Sam, and her death blow is telling her that she's fat. And Sam is like, no shit. If only she knew to criticize my doctoral thesis. Hilarious. T. Kingfisher's funny. The most ambitious book that I read in May is The Adventures of Amina Al-Sirafi by Shannon Chakraborty. But I did the audiobook for this. I keep forgetting to look up who was narrating because it's important. It was performed by Lamis Isaac and Amin Al-Gamal. Both were incredible, but I have to say that the variety that the main narrator was able to pull off was exceptional. She did like 90% of the characters. Only the small bits were narrated by the secondary narrator, so it was exceptional because these characters come from all over the world, like literally all over the world, except North America, I guess. So the different accents and different voices and different characters that she was able to pull off was amazing. This was, without a doubt, the best performed audiobook I have ever listened to. Give it a listen. I mentioned when I first talked about getting this through Book of the Month that it would have been a cover buy for me, even if I wasn't interested in the story, and I stand by that. The cover is gorge. But when it comes down to it, the book itself, the story, also really, really good. Better than I expected. I didn't love City of Brass. Don't hate me. I wasn't a huge essay/Shannon Chakraborty fan prior to this, but I am now. So maybe I'll go back and give City of Brass a second go and the rest of the series at some point. The Adventures of Amina Al-Sirafi is a solid like 4.75 stars for me. Why did it lose 0.25 stars? I don't know. Some parts were like the teensiest bit predictable. There was a bit of repetition in events where the details of the events were different, but it was the exact same setup multiple times, which they were good. They were good setups, so who really cares? But that did lose 0.25 for me. I listened to a lot of audiobooks this month. In the middle of May though, I listened back to back to 2 Scottish folk horrors. I talked about this a bit on my Instagram, but I think Scottish folk horror is my new favorite genre. There should be more of it. It's exceptional. The first one I have put a review for already on my Instagram, so maybe you've seen it, but it's The Ghost Woods by C.J. Cooke. This is my first foray into C.J. Cooke. I haven't read The Lighthouse Witches, which is her big one that she's got. This one I think is a bit lesser known. Tell me something. I think this is kind of interesting. These books are not related, but the publisher really was like, what if we make them look like they're part of a series? Anyways, total side note. I just got dust all over my face. The Ghost Woods is set in a mother and baby home in the 60s, which I guess was a thing. I've read actually a couple of mother and baby home stories, this being the only horror one so far. But basically, single pregnant ladies are shipped here to have their babies so that they're not shaming the family. This one is set in the creepy woods of Scotland. I've talked before about my mycophobia. I am disgusted and terrified of mushrooms. I should have known, based on the cover and the fact that there are mushrooms on it, that this would be a very mushroomy book. So consider this your warning if you also hate mushrooms. This is a very mushroomy book, probably the worst one I've ever read. And by worst, I mean like for the amount of mushrooms, not for quality of the book, because this was a high quality book. I really enjoyed this. Not really a spoiler to say we get sort of into the fairy realm in this one. You know, when you have mushrooms, you're gonna have fairies. It's based in real Scottish mythology and it was really fun. Definitely spooky, some really great imagery, some really great scenes, some wonderful characters, surprisingly sapphic. Solid 4 out of 5. Recommend. The immediate follow-up to The Ghost Woods was The Whistling by Rebecca Netley, or if you're listening to the audiobook like I was, The Whistling. Is that a Scottish accent? The Whistling. This is a brand new release from Rebecca Netley. It came into the store that I worked at and I read the blurb out loud to one of my coworkers who loves horror. Remote Scottish island. She's a nanny to a mute, creepy little girl whose twin recently died. There's strange lullabies and whistling coming from the house and the moors. Safe to say we both immediately bought it. Ultimately, also 4 stars for me, very on par with The Ghost Woods. This one was a much more standard haunted house story and reminded me extremely of The Haunting of Bly Manor, which is the follow-up season to Mike Flanagan's The Haunting of Hill House, which is an exceptional show. Go watch it. Some scenes were like shot for shot with Bly Manor, which was a little like off-putting at first, and then I thought, you know what, I love Bly Manor, why am I mad? Ultimately, actually, this is better Bly Manor. That's the new tagline. The Whistling, better Bly Manor. Instead of fairies, this one dives a bit more into witchcraft, but still set in legitimate Scottish mythology, so check her out. When I did my April TBR video back in the day, in April, I mentioned the novella, The Crane Husband. It's very short, barely 100 pages. This is by Kelly Barnhill. Kelly Barnhill also wrote When Women Were Dragons, which I haven't read, but I've discovered is very on theme for this book. Kelly Barnhill apparently really wants to turn into some sort of flying creature and leave, because that is what happens in both this and When Women Were Dragons. I didn't know what to expect going into The Crane Husband. I know that it is a modern retelling of The Crane Wife, which is a Japanese fable. There were definitely a lot of elements pulled from that in this, like quite literally the weaving and the crane, for example. It hit me in the feels, for sure. I read this over the course of a couple of hours. I read it very quickly because I was just absolutely sucked in. Ultimately, not a lot happens in this book, but it is emotionally heavy. I don't know, I feel like I'm still gathering my thoughts on this. I got through it really quickly, and as soon as I finished it, I was like, wow, 5 stars, exceptional. And as the days have passed, I haven't been thinking about it, which usually for me means that it's not actually 5 stars. So I'm gonna give this more like 4 1/4 because I am arbitrary and there's no actual scale to my ratings. This is a beautifully, beautifully written book. The plot was really good, made me sad, made me tear up at one point, which was unexpected. But I don't know, it just didn't leave the most lasting impression, which is important for me when, you know, nonsense rating books. That being said, I actually ordered 2 copies of this for the store that I work in, so I'm doing a great job selling it, right? So obviously that was 6 books, but I did say it was kind of 7 because the 7th book that I read was The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. This is technically a graphic novel, and even then, it's not a lot for a graphic novel. I read it at work. I hope you can see this. It's really hard to hold up for some reason. But you know, it's very small. Everyone knows this book / the little short film. It was stunning. I cried at work by accident. I didn't mean to read it, but I just thought this edition was really beautiful. So I read it, and my favorite was Fox. And that is what I'm gonna say about this. I mentioned very briefly in my April wrap-up that I was putting a pause on Godkiller by Hannah Kaner. That's still true. I have officially decided to wait for the audiobook to come out, which is September. So, sorry Godkiller. But yeah, you're going on the shelf. Not a book that I finished, but as of this morning, I started reading Untethered Sky by Fonda Lee. This is her brand new novella. I'm loving this so far. It's really good. I mean, obviously Fonda Lee is exceptional. I'm a big fan of birds, so this one, I have high hopes for this one. I also like that it's very short. I know we're not gonna get a lot of world building, but honestly, I'm like 20 pages in and there has been a lot of world building, and rocks are really cool and I like the character. So high hopes. Maybe this will be in my June wrap-up video. I don't know why I'm saying maybe. It will be in my June wrap-up video. It's so short. Of course, I'm gonna finish it before the end of June. Anyways, that's just a little quick update on what I've been reading in May, and then, you know, the first book that I will technically be reading in June. Let me know if you read any of these same books in May. I'm sure that you read The Adventures of Amina Al-Sirafi. Let me know if you've read any Scottish folk horror and if you have any suggestions for me. And let me know what your top read was from May, or what your bottom read was. I want to know that too. For me, I'd have to say my top read was definitely A House with Good Bones. Fantastic. Bottom read? I don't know. This month was great. I don't want to pick my bottom read. Maybe The Crane Husband. I don't know. But that's not... It was really good. I just, you know, it's the least exciting and memorable for me. So it goes in the bottom. I don't have to pick a bottom. This is my video. Anyways, before I go, don't forget to like and subscribe and ring the bell icon so you know when I upload new videos. I upload 3 days a week. I love you guys. Goodbye.